Forum for House District 33. We are pleased to host 10 candidate forums during the 2024 election season. The League of Women Voters of Fremont County is a nonpartisan grassroots organization that is part of the State and National League of Women Voters. The League believes voters should play a critical role in democracy and encourage informed and active government participation. The League is dedicated to voter education, voting rights, and providing information that helps voters make informed decisions at the polls. The League does not support or endorse any candidate running for office. The League distributes unbiased candidate information through our digital general election voter guide, also mailed to over 19,000 households in Fremont County. Our Be a Voter guide informs the citizens how to register, request an absentee ballot, and other need-to-know voter information. Please consider adding your name to our email listserv or on the sign-up sheet at the information table. Please visit our Facebook page or website for other information on elections. Tonight's forum is being live streamed by County 10 and will be available online post-forum at County 10, YouTube, and Facebook, and through the League's website at lwv10.org. We want to thank our County Clerk, Julie Fries, and the excellent Fremont County Elections Office staff for providing guidance and information over the past few months in registering voters. Thank you to Maggie Miller for moderating this forum and County 10 for hosting our forum videos and providing the sound system for us. Of course, we want to thank the candidates for running for elected office. It is a commitment of time, energy, and emotional and mental strength. We welcome these candidates and wish them well in their campaigns. With that, please welcome our moderator for tonight's forum, Maggie Miller, who will introduce the guidelines and begin tonight's events. Thank you.
I am indeed Maggie Miller, and I live here in Fremont County. I am a guardian ad litem attorney for the state of Wyoming as a contract employee, and I have two daughters who've grown up here. One is in medical school through the WWAMI program, the collaboration with the University of Washington. She's down in Laramie, and the other lucky girl is finishing up 5 months of working for the Allen family up out of Dickinson Park as a wrangler. And I think she has the better deal doing hockey camps right now. So we welcome you to this forum for House District 33 with the incumbent, Sarah Penn and Ivan Posey. And we're thrilled to have you here and have the opportunity to let you educate yourselves about the candidates. I firmly believe in democracy, and it's not only a right, but it's a responsibility. And we all need to educate ourselves, and this is our opportunity here tonight. The forum has a structure that will start with opening statements, and to give you a heads up, maybe we'll start with Ms. Penn, and each candidate will be given 2 minutes to make an opening statement, and then there will be, I believe, 15 questions, 2 minutes to respond, and then there's a, and Nan's reminding me that there's a 15-second warning flag here that the candidates will see, and then there's a chance for a brief rebuttal. The last section before the closing statements, the last section will be some audience questions. After the 7th round of questions here, volunteers are going to circulate with some cards, and if you'd like to write down a question of something you think hasn't been covered, we'll collect those cards, and then the cards, they'll look through and see which questions might be the best to ask. And then we'll conclude with closing statements. Each candidate will be given a minute. And somewhere in there, we're going to weave in a little bit of time to address some of the negative mailers that have been sent to people in people's mailboxes. Some of you probably received those. I'm pretty sure that you're going to hear stuff tonight that you agree with, and probably some stuff you don't agree with, and we would just urge you to reserve any comments, applause, critiques for the end. And after the conclusion of the forum, people are welcome to stay and visit, which would be really nice. So if we get started with a 2-minute opening by Sarah Penn, please.
Okay. All right, so I am Sarah Penn, and as an opening remark, I would like to remark that I am so glad to see you guys here. Welcome, and thank you for coming, because it's not very many people who want to come and do things like this. So, by way of introduction, my name's Sarah Penn, and my family and I have lived in Fremont County for 10 years in Fort Washakie, and we have loved it. My husband is a teacher. He teaches CTE, Career Tech Ed, on the reservation. He's been there for 8 years, 6 at Fort Washakie, and the last couple at Wyoming Indian, and he really loves teaching our kids the skills for success in the future. We've got 3 little kids, ages 5, 7, and 9, and they keep us running, they keep us busy. They all attended reservation schools, Fort Washakie and Wyoming Indian. I have been a nurse for 20 years and a nurse practitioner for 15. So, the reason that I got into healthcare is because I wanted to help people. I care about people. I wanted to serve them. And so I've dedicated my career and basically my life to doing that. And, they say if you choose something to do that you love, then you never work a day in your life. And I think that that's something that I could use to describe what I do. In the past couple of years, 2 years, and I've had a little different avenue on serving people, and it's something that I never expected, but something that has been a roller coaster of emotion, we'll say, but I have enjoyed it, and I appreciate the opportunity to have that ability to serve you. So I have, in the last 2 years, served on the Labor, Health, and Social Services Committee, which is a big committee. We cover a lot of topics. And also I've been serving on the Tribal Relations Committee, which has also been wonderful, talking about things specifically related to needs of our enrolled tribal members. So thank you again for coming.
Thank you, Sarah. And I believe there will be time at the end if you had a couple of additional thoughts. Ivan Posey, 2 minutes, please.
Well, good evening, everybody, and following Sarah's comments, I welcome you all here tonight. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Ivan Posey, born and raised on the Wind River Reservation. That's my home. I serve as the Tribal Education Director for this college here, as well as the Director for Institute of Tribal Learning. I come from, I always say this because it's the truth, is I come from a large family. There was 13 of us. Out of the 6 brothers, 5 of us served in the United States Army. A couple went into the Marines. I love Wyoming. I love our community. I only lived away from here for 2 to 3 years, but always come home. This is my home. I love this area, and I love the state of Wyoming. My interest to serve is I've been in public office for 21 years with my tribe. I'm an enrolled member of the Eastern Shoshone tribe. I have 3 children, and one is living in Colorado, my oldest. The second, my daughter, she's pursuing her master's at MSU Bozeman, and my youngest is going to school here studying film. So I've been very blessed with good children, a lot smarter than I am. But I think that's pretty much, well, I know the questions will follow and we'll see what's in store, but I wanted to introduce myself to you, where I'm from and where I come from. So, hoo-wee-hoo.
Thank you both. So, I'm going to call you Ivan Posey, if that's okay, instead of Mr. Posey. Ivan, the first question is going to go to you. You'll have 1.5 minutes, and then after Sarah responds, you'll have a 30-second rebuttal, okay? What are the most pressing issues facing the people living within House District 33, and how do you propose to address these challenges?
My visits out in the communities is off the reservation. The property tax issue is probably always been in the forefront. Obviously, it's nothing new to try to develop a system within the legislature to address that issue. I really personally think that it needs to be needs-based. I think there probably needs to be a residency clause in there, and maybe depending on income, or a person that has 2 houses. On the reservation, I think education is continually ongoing issue. I think with a need for better health delivery systems in terms of mental health. Mental health is an umbrella that covers a lot of things, addiction, our aging community. And another thing I wanted to touch on before my time's up here is the brain drain that we continually have, and that has been plagued the state of Wyoming for the last 30 years, is our kids going to UW or going somewhere and then leaving the state. We become a state of retirees, and we need to keep those people here, the younger ones.
Thank you. Sarah?
Could you say it one more time, pretty please?
What are the most pressing issues facing the people living within House District 33, and how do you propose to address these challenges?
Yes, so Ivan definitely outlined one of the most pressing issues, especially for residents off of the reservation, and that is property taxes. When I'm knocking doors, that is one of the things that I hear about over and over and over, and we've been hearing about it for the last several years because we've watched our property taxes go up 20%, up 30% the next year, and it gets to the point where it's unaffordable, where people are being taxed out of their homes, and then where do they go? And so that's an issue. How do we solve that? We get our spending under control, so that we are focusing on the things that is the proper role of government with the money that we have, and then we apply any surplus that we have to pay down people's property taxes. It's not a difficult scenario. It's difficult sometimes to say, okay, this is the direction that we want to take, and then take it. Another big one that I've been thinking a lot about, and actually this is the reason that I'm doing what I'm doing, is citizen apathy. And that may sound like a funny thing, but it's not funny. It's gotten us into the situations that we're in now. And this is both on the reservation and off the reservation. I have people call me, enrolled tribal members, that say, help me out. What can we do in this issue? Because I have this concern. And I say, you guys are dealing with the same problems that we're having in our governments off the reservation. You need to rally your troops. You need to talk to your neighbors. You need to get people involved so that you can affect change, that you talk to your leaders, your government leaders, your local municipalities, and the people have the power to create change. And so that's another big one that I'm passionate about.
Ivan, you don't have to do a rebuttal, but if you'd like 30 seconds to address anything that Sarah said or anything that you left out of your first comment. You're good. Okay. All right, next question goes to you, Sarah. What specific efforts will you take to interact with people living on and off the reservation within House District 33?
Okay, so I am, as I said, big on citizen engagement. So I have participated in about 8, I think, if I count them up, not including campaign seasons, 8 town halls since I have been elected. That is the best time, in my opinion, to get to talk to people and get to hear the voice of the citizens and to address issues as they are happening, as they're going on. And so that's one of the big ones, is making sure that our interactions include, how can I serve you better? What can I do for you? Excuse me. A big one is just being available to listen. When people have concerns, when they have problems, they can call me, and maybe that's not within my purview to assist them at the state level, but I can sure listen to them, and I can sure try to help them through making decisions on which direction might be the best way to go. And that means a lot to people, to just listen and know that their concerns are being heard, because too often now, governments don't pay attention to what the people have to say. And so I think one of the best ways to interact is just to be present and to listen to them.
Would you like me to repeat the question?
Please.
What specific efforts will you take to interact with people living on and off the reservation within House District 33?
As Sarah mentioned, reaching out to the people of what the concerns are. But I think the House District 33 is made up of so many different variables. There's certain things that don't affect tribal people. Obviously, the property tax, like the land we own as individuals, is trust. So we don't pay taxes on those. We have jurisdictional issues with law enforcement, different court systems. So I think the most important thing for this district is the continued education to learn more about each other. You know, I'm sometimes surprised because I've lived here my whole life. I've worked for my tribe. I've served as chairman many years of that organization, but there's still a lack of understanding on both sides of how systems work. So I think that is a continual process as we have younger people coming of age, getting them to vote, getting them to participate in the system. But I think listening is one of the most important.
Was there any part of that, Sarah, that you, no? Okay. All right, next question goes to you again, Ivan. Given our current system of taxation that funds our government and public programs, what do you believe should be taxed?
You know, Wyoming has a long history of having no income tax, where other states have. I know the property tax issue; those funds go to the local municipalities. You know, there was nothing funded out of the state government regarding the property tax. Maybe there is a way. The only way that I see at this point is probably sales tax. That could increase some revenues, but that would depend how much goes to the state coffers and how much stays at the local coffers. You know, the thing is with the reservation is we get taxed on our oil and gas revenues, and from the state, and we get very little back in terms of services. So that's always an age-old issue with tribes in the state in terms of the ad valorem taxes and some of those. But only thing I could see right now is probably sales tax increase. That'll bring in more revenue. Our non-renewable resources are diminishing as we talk.
One more time.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Could you just say the question one more time, please?
Yes. Given our current system of taxation that funds our government and public programs, what do you believe should be taxed?
Okay, so what should be taxed? I think that this is a little bit of a philosophical question that we all need to entertain. I would like to say that we start with a firm base on what are our constitutionally outlined responsibilities. The role of government is to protect life, liberty, property, the pursuit of happiness in a way that is properly delegated by individual citizens. It's important to remember that government doesn't have any abilities that the individual citizens don't already possess and then delegate to them. So the government can't take from you and give to you because I don't have the ability to take from you and give to you. This is a big job, getting the government back to where things should exist. And I think that it would be irresponsible to say that it could happen overnight. It's taken decades, probably a century, for us to get where we're at, and it may take that long to get back. I don't think that we need to cut programs, but I think that we need to cut the waste. The way that we go about identifying what needs modified first is to stop the creep of government. And then we need to take a closer look at each individual agency and their budget via audits and find out which ways can we affect change the best, and then come up with a plan to gradually roll back those unconstitutional functions.
So before we give Ivan a rebuttal, if he'd like, I want to press you a little bit. You spoke about property taxes, perhaps in your opening, I believe. Do you think property taxes should be the source of the revenue, or income tax, or sales tax, or so what should be taxed? That's what I want to know. What would you tax?
So if you look at our Constitution, then probably the only constitutional tax might be an income tax.
Okay, thank you. Did you want to rebut anything, Ivan? Sarah, the homestead exemption law now includes a 50% exemption for homeowners who are older than 65 and have paid property taxes for 25 years. This exemption will create a state and county revenue shortfall. How should the revenue loss be replaced, and or what services should be cut?
So this bill was HB 3 that was just passed, and which I voted in favor of. So as was just stated, it's available to those over 65 who have paid Wyoming property taxes for 25 years, and what it offers is a 50% reduction in the assessment value of your residential real property on your primary residence. And there's a sunset, so it only lasts for 2 years. So what is that amount of money that we're talking about in the state? A 50% reduction in those assessments. It equates to about $5 million per year, times 2 years is about $10 million. So what does that mean to schools? That's about 0.2% of their revenue. We automatically increase the block grant funding by 4.5% every biennium. That's just built into our model of what we do to allow for inflation and other potential things that come up. Well, inflation averages about 2.5%. And so I think that they can absorb a 0.2% reduction in funding for 2 years if it means keeping our seniors in their homes.
Thank you. And Ivan, would you like me to read that long question back?
Please.
The homestead exemption law now includes a 50% exemption for homeowners who are older than 65 and have paid property taxes for 25 years. This exemption will create a state and county revenue shortfall. How should the revenue loss be replaced, and or what services should be cut?
You know, that's a really tough question. I know that the cuts are going to affect other services that are provided, most importantly, probably education, you know, so I think not being part of the legislature, you know, or being part of the Joint Appropriations Committee, those numbers have been kicked around for quite a few years. And it's more of a serious problem than people would think of just cutting the tax for cutting the property tax, because it's really going to have, as Sarah mentioned, ramifications on education or roads and some of those things that come to the local municipalities. So I think we just got to be careful, and as it's not a done deal. It'll continue to be discussed in the years ahead. So I think we need to be careful as a legislature how we continue to do that.
Okay, Ivan, within the powers of the Wyoming legislature, what steps should be implemented to combat the missing, murdered Indigenous persons epidemic?
You know, again, that's another important issue that relates to jurisdiction and the issue of learning more about each other. You know, it wasn't an issue years ago when all of these ladies and people went missing. It came to the state's forefront several years ago, and through local activists that worked in that area. I think there are some things that have been done with the support of the governors addressing that, but I really think that there's more education. And in the meantime, those incidents are still happening yet in terms of missing and murdered individuals. I mean, I know of probably 3 or 4 that hasn't been solved over the last 40 years, you know, so it's, like I said, it comes down to jurisdiction. It comes down, there's the FBI that handles those cases for the Reservation and Major Crimes Act. There's the local BIA, law enforcement, but there's also the state that works on those.
You might
Please
you
go
might have
ahead.
some insight from the legislature already, Sarah. What would you say to this?
So the question, just to be clear, was what can the legislature do to take steps to combat MMIP? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So, yes, this is a tough issue that we are facing, and as Ivan said, a lot of this is jurisdictional. There is, it happens here, but does that mean it's an FBI case, or does that mean that there's sheriff involved, and depending on who else was involved, it gets really sticky really fast. There's also a lack of trust in our law enforcement by some. So there's a hesitance to want to report things sometimes. The legislature has done a few things recently. We passed, so in Tribal Relations Committee last summer, we talked about creating a cold case database, and we passed that bill. So now the Department of DCI, they are now have been tasked with starting this cold case file and keeping this so that as more information comes in, then maybe we can solve some of these cases in the future. Also, have been looking into forensic DNA. Is there some way that DNA can be used to go back and trace and solve some of these issues? And then we also passed the Ashanti Alert, which is similar to the Amber Alert for children, but affects adults. And so it's a grassroots community effort. The governor's task force has been very helpful at organizing people and getting things moving. And I think that the awareness is starting to increase.
Did you want to add anything, Ivan?
No, I just think the cooperation locally and statewide has been very positive. You know, I know some tribes have a difficult time working with local jurisdictions on this issue. I see where in the state of Washington, they kind of cut ties, the MMIP movement, with the city of Seattle because they felt they wasn't doing too much. So I think we're on the right track here.
Okay, next question's for you, Sarah. The Select Committee on Tribal Relations has been discussing 2 bills regarding sales tax: the Wind River Reservation remote sales tax and the Tribal Trust Lands sales and use tax exemption. What is your opinion on these bills?
Sorry, I'm getting over a cold. So the first one, the remote sales tax, what that one is looking at is how are taxes that have been collected in error on the reservation, and we're talking about remotes, we're talking about online sales only. If I live on the reservation, if I buy something on Amazon remotely and it's delivered to me, sourced to me on the reservation, do I pay sales tax? That's the question that we're trying to answer. And so we brought a few bills before the business councils and the citizens and said, okay, what do you prefer? And that so far has been the one that's kind of moved forward. And what it does is it collects the sales tax. The state will collect the sales tax, and then it will distribute that sales tax to the tribes to then use as they need for the people. So that's the first one. The second one is on the trust lands. So like the Wind River Indian Reservation is built on trust lands. It says that currently taxes aren't being collected there, and the state isn't auditing or looking into that and saying, oh, you need to be collecting taxes. So we're just codifying in that bill what is currently already happening.
Ivan, what's your thoughts on that? Or do you need me to read that back? It was long.
Well, you know, years ago, there was the tax commission that was established in 1988 to look at specifically oil and gas revenues. And that's where some of the studies came where so much taxes are leaving the reservation based on our oil and gas revenue and not coming back in services. So I think, you know, we continue to pay tax as tribal citizens and sometimes don't get the return for that. You know, it's a taxation without representation, and it still lingers out there. I know Sarah mentioned about the online sales and some of those types of efforts that are underway, but it's a much broader picture than that in terms of how we get some services for the taxes that we pay.
Specifically with regard to those 2 laws, though, proposed laws, the Sarah's example was Amazon. Do you favor that?
You know, I guess it would depend on where those taxes go, how we collect those and where those taxes go. You know, if they go to the Department of Revenue or whatever, we need a way on a reservation to have a system that captures those taxes to utilize for services.
Did you want to rebut any of that, Sarah?
If I can add a couple of things. So as he just said, it depends on where the taxes go. As I've been talking to constituents and asking them that question, how do you feel about these bills? That is one of the big question marks in people's minds as to which bill that they favor is where are the taxes going to go. I had one individual say, how about we make the taxes go to pay for ambulance service? I think that's a great idea. That's not my decision because the taxes are going to go to the tribes and to make the decisions. But that's one of the questions that a lot of people have.
Okay, Ivan, what assets and challenges are facing our public schools within House District 33?
From my discussion and visiting with parts of the community in Atlantic City, for example, there's access to services for the kids up there. Most of them are homeschooled, and there needs to be something developed in terms of how to get a quality education for those students. I'm not saying they're left out now, but the people had concerns about that. I'm not too sure if that's a state issue or a local issue. I know they work hand in hand on some of those issues. I think with the reservation schools, we need to, as George Bush mentioned, no child left behind. I think there's ways to incorporate for students who struggle in some areas, some cultural methods of teaching, whether that's utilizing beadwork or putting up a teepee or, that's something that grasp. I'm a non-traditional student. I didn't go back to take college until I was 30 years old. But I struggled with those especially math when I was younger. And one day it just went off in my head that I think I get it. But like I said, I'll stop it there.
You have 15 seconds after I hold this up.
All right, Sarah, what assets and challenges are facing our public schools within the district?
So that's a tough question because we have a quite array within the district. So we have a couple of districts in District 33 that are doing really well when you compare with state averages and things like that. We have a couple of districts in this District 33 that are not doing well when compared with what is the rest of the state having ongoing. So our 3 state-funded schools on the reservation, so Fort Washakie, Wyoming, Indian, Arapahoe, they are struggling. And we entertained this idea last summer. We had the Department of Education come and talk to us, had statistics. We talked to the superintendents of the schools and said, okay, what can be done, looking at funding things. And I don't know that funding is the issue. When you look at, Lander District, Riverton District, they spend about $17,000 per student per year, compared to about $16,000 throughout the state. If you look at our 3 schools on the reservation, they're spending about $23,000 to $26,000 of state funds per student, and that doesn't include federal. If you get the federal funds in there, then it's about $36,000 to $46,000 per student per year. And so one of the issues that was raised by one of the tribal elders, actually there was a parent and an elder, they both kind of said the same thing. They said, you cannot fix the issues in our schools in this committee. The issues that we have in our schools start at home. And I applauded him. I couldn't agree more.
You have 30 seconds if you want to add anything on that topic, Ivan.
Well, I think education is a local issue. Our 3, basically the curriculum and standards are pretty much the same. I know there's very little wiggle room to change any of those, but I think it remains a local issue with the local school boards.
Okay, thank you. So if the audience has any questions, volunteers will collect them from you. Is that good? Yeah, it's good. Okay. Did you say you have one, but you didn't get a card? Michelle? Michelle, is there one more card? Thank you. All right, Sarah. Do you have concerns about Wyoming's voting and election process?
So Article 6, Section 13 of our Wyoming Constitution, which I have here somewhere, tasks the legislature with protecting our elections. It says that the legislature shall pass laws to secure the purity of elections and guard against abuses. So that is a task that has been put on the legislature. As long as there are electronics in our elections, I will have concerns. And honestly, if there aren't, there should always be concerns. This is an issue that is of the utmost importance. And so, I look at it as, let's talk about our money, right? If I go to a bank and say, the bank that I'm using, I have my money, what are your security, what security you're using? And they say, oh, we have contracted with a really great outside security group. And while we can't see their software, they assure us that your money is safe. And therefore, we don't see any reason as to why we need to look for any further security measures. What would I do in that situation? I'd take my money and I'd go home. I'd go find somewhere else to put it. Our elections should require the utmost security efforts.
Before I let you talk, Ivan, I want to know if there's like one or two things you'd point at, Sarah, that you'd like to see happen.
So an easy thing, with something that's most likely to pass more simply, is ensuring that our voter ID laws are shored up. We have to have show ID and proof of residence to get a library card. In this state, in some counties, you have to show ID and proof of residence to use their dump. And yet we don't require both of those things in our elections. That's a simple thing.
All right, Ivan, do you want to hear the question again? Do you have concerns about Wyoming's voting and election processes? Only because I hijacked it a little bit just now.
I think if you look back on the way that the elections have been run historically in the state of Wyoming, there's been very little instances of voter fraud. We're a small state, we're a small county, and we got to put trust in the people that run those elections. I would lean more towards the people of the election judges, the people who run those in the local counties, and I don't think I see any widespread fraud. So I think there always is an opportunity to better the system, and I'm in favor of that. But I think right now I don't have any concerns on the voting.
Okay, thank you. Sarah, did you want to add anything before we move on? Okay. Ivan, are you concerned about the allocation and oversight of water within House District 33?
Could you repeat that?
Yes. Are you concerned about the allocation and oversight of water within House District 33?
Oversight of water. Mm-hmm. Water has always been a contentious issue on and off the reservation where I come from. As you know, in 1977, the state of Wyoming sued the Wind River tribes over the water issue, and we won. It went to the Supreme Court, and we won the ability to utilize 500,000 acre-feet of water, but we have no spigot to catch that amount of water. So I think those discussions will continue to go on. Most of our water goes through the Big Wind, eventually the Bighorn Basin, and is utilized by people not on the reservation. As you may be well aware of, we have an antiquated irrigation system, delivery system that doesn't get water to people, and we are charged water charges for the use of that water, even though we may not know where that land is at. With the fractionation issue with tribal lands is you could have 400 or 500 people on a 40-acre piece of land, and they get charged water charges if there's a small ditch that's dry that goes through that property. And if they don't pay, they'll take their income tax or whatever. So it's a very complicated system. I know I've had friends that sat on a water board. I've never sat on the tribal water board, but as we know, water is precious. Too bad we're on the other side of the divide to do that, to utilize it. There's really no market on this side of the Continental Divide as opposed to the other side.
What are your thoughts, Sarah?
So yes, absolutely. Water is the issue, really. I mean, obviously we all need water for life. And so if you look through history, people have fought and died over water, and we still have a lot of those fights going on. Hopefully people aren't dying these days. But my neighbor sits on the tribal water board, and so he's always got a lot to say about this or that. And as Ivan said, it does become difficult because there's a lot of a lot of maintenance issues and things upkeep. You have to pay your money, or you don't get, but you may not be getting your water, and so it's a difficult thing, and it's still, that's one of those issues that's never going to go away.
Did you want to add anything, Ivan? I think Sarah would probably like your extra 30 seconds. Do you want it, Sarah? Okay. All right. So, Sarah, this question goes to you. What are your top 2 concerns about Wyoming's public land, and how would you address these concerns?
So my concerns are that our federal government has claimed more powers and assets than they have constitutional enumeration to do. So Wyoming needs to regain her sovereignty. We need to ensure that we're seeking every opportunity to regain those constitutional rights as a sovereign state. All we need is a seat at the table to when those decisions are being made, because too often we are left out of the decision-making process, as evidenced by what has recently been happening with the RMP, and then we're simply left to deal with the outcome.
Two top concerns about public land, Ivan.
Well, I know there has been a push to bring some public land, whether it's BLM or Forest Service, under the state control. If that's done, I don't know what type of funding that would come with, because those pieces of federal land are funded partially by PILT, which is payment in lieu of taxes. And so I think if the state continues to move in that direction, the money has to come from somewhere to run those, whether it's Forest Service land and look at developed recreation, wilderness, range management. It's a large plate. So I think at this point, public land should stay in public land and in that status until it's more thought out.
Public land's in federal hands. Do I understand you correctly?
What's that?
She said, are you saying public lands in federal lands?
Between public lands and federal lands?
Is that what you're saying?
No, I just said the public federal land should stay in public land. I mean, public use. It belongs to everybody.
Okay.
If that makes sense, Maggie.
Yes. Did you want to add anything, Sarah? Okay. Ivan, today the Joint Minerals Business and Economic Development Committee considered draft legislation allowing for a private facility to transport and store highly radioactive waste from the nation's nuclear reactors into Wyoming. Would you support this bill?
Repeat that a little bit slower, Maggie.
Okay, it's important. Today, the Joint Minerals Business and Economic Development Committee considered draft legislation allowing for a private facility to transport and store highly radioactive waste from the nation's nuclear reactors into Wyoming. Would you support this bill?
I would need to have more information on that. I know locally we had the mill tailings in by St. Stephen's, and I know a lot of that was hauled out to Gas Hills area in the late 80s. So, you know, so there's a lot of environmental and contamination associated with that. As I said, we need to protect our Mother Earth as much as we can. And I would say at this point, I would need to find out a little more about that issue.
Okay, thank you. Sarah, what's your position on this?
Well, like my friend here, I would, of course, need more information. Ask me to vote on that bill right now, and that's not a smart thing to do because obviously that's a big issue. We need to make sure that we understand what all aspects are. So, you know, there are 20 or 54 nuclear power plants in our country, and I believe 93 or something reactors. Nuclear power plants produce about 20% of our nation's electricity. And nuclear plants in and of themselves are they actually have a very, very good safety rating. People are really worried about nuclear power plants because of, you know, things that have happened in the past, but the way that they operate nowadays, they're actually very safe. Obviously, this question is a different issue altogether. Do we store it? There's a lot to look at. You know, how does the Department of Transportation feel? If this is a private company, you know, what specific parameters do we need to look at there? Are people going to be at risk on roads? What safety precautions are being taken in that manner? And so it's a big issue, not one to be taken lightly and not one to be rushed on. But if it is deemed to be reasonable and safe, and I assume the reason for drafting such legislation is probably revenue, I think it's reasonable to look at those things, but with real caution.
Did you want to add anything, Ivan? No thoughts on I-80 and tractor-trailer rigs with nuclear waste? Okay. Yeah. All right, this question, Sarah, is tailor-made for you. How can the Wyoming legislature help solve the problem of access to many healthcare services, including maternity health care?
Okay, how much time do we have?
I read your thing, by the way.
Yeah, so this is a big beast, man. It's a multifaceted issue. We've been addressing this specifically in the Labor Health Committee this past interim, and I'll be honest, we did not come up with a decision. We came up with a decision to continue to look into this because there are so many moving parts here as to what the issues really are. One of the things that I have identified as we've been having these discussions with various agencies and such, the model of healthcare being delivered in our country these days has changed over the past few, 2, 3, 4 decades. It used to be that we would see a doctor through the lifespan, one-stop shop kind of doc, but that has changed, and now we see specialists. So we see a obstetrician and then a pediatrician, and if we need our tonsils out, then we go to an ENT. If we need ear tubes, we go to an ENT. If we break an arm, we go to an orthopedist. If we have sunspots, we go to a dermatologist. And the issue that brings to Wyoming is we have a very rural population. And so we don't have the population to bring in all of the specialists. And so what does that mean for access? It means that we travel, right? It means that we drive to Casper, or we drive to Billings, or to Denver, or to Jackson, or all the different places, or they come to us. Once a week, we go to a clinic and they come to us. And so it's very difficult. It's something that I want to continue working on and looking at because it's a big issue. Healthcare access, not having providers to see you, is a big deal, and it's a real challenge.
So what can the legislature do about access, Ivan? Yep.
I think, sometimes studies kill a good initiative. But I think as a tribal person, as our people have been studied over and over and over, and healthcare continues to be a top issue, whether it's mental health, prenatal health, those types of people that suffer with diabetes, cancer. It's like Sarah said, it's a multifaceted issue. But it's a pretty broad issue. But I think we do need better healthcare delivery systems. I think. I don't know how we could get some of the specialists here in the state, but I think most of the people that are inflicted with more serious are flown out, whether to Colorado, Salt Lake, Billings, and it causes another hardship on the families to try to get there. But that's just basically our realness and how we choose to live. But we need continued ambulance services and quality people that are working in that area to provide those services effectively.
Do you want to add something else?
Yes, please. I'll talk like the Micro Machine Man, so you can hopefully understand me. I brought 2 bills that I identified as issues as we were having our discussions, or asked that they be drafted. One is to look at tort reform. One of the issues that we keep coming up against in this discussion is liability. An obstetrician has concerns about covering a nurse midwife if she can safely deliver a baby, which I believe that she can. What happens though if something goes wrong and they end up requiring an emergency C-section? Then this overseeing physician has to assume that liability. And so I said, let's look at tort reform. In this state, we don't have much, and so is there something that can be done there to entice people to come, providers to come or to stay? And then a second one is conscience protection for our healthcare providers. Ever since COVID, we lost a lot of healthcare workers across the country, and they have not been coming back. And so this bill would look at ensuring that healthcare providers are not going to be required to participate in procedures or do things that they feel morally opposed to.
Okay, Ivan. This is for you. I can tell now. Should the government establish a facility in Fremont County to assist residents experiencing mental health and substance abuse crises? If not, how would you propose to address this issue?
You know, I think a lot of those discussions have been had in the past. You know, I remember when I first was elected in '94, there was discussion to purchase, and we did purchase the old Wind River High School to turn it into a treatment facility. I think since those days, programs have increased services through certain programs, whether it's through the White Buffalo or those types of things that are associated with those addictions. I think people that are in addiction, and this is just me, that need something to do. They need job training. They need a safe place to stay. They can't be put back into the same environment that led them to whatever area they put in. So I think it's evolved over time, that from a residential treatment facility, and I'm sure those are still needed, but I think the local efforts to address those through certain types of programs, certain job training, certain residential aspects, not a treatment center, have been pretty effective in addressing those issues.
Could you just give that to me one more time, please?
Should the government establish a facility in Fremont County to assist residents experiencing mental health and substance abuse crises? If not, how would you propose to address this issue?
Yes, so there's no question that we are seeing a mental health crisis in our state and in our country. The question is, what, of course, are we doing about it? And so it's another one of those sticky issues. I would like to focus on what are the roots, rather than simply treating the symptoms here with medications and things. Our Wyoming Medicaid spent like $5.8 million last year on our children, Wyoming's children, on psychotropic drugs. We have a problem here. And yet there's all of this emerging body of research that's showing the link between, what else are we seeing? We're seeing rising rates of diabetes. We're seeing rising rates of obesity in addition to mental health. And we're seeing a link between what is our diet and what is happening with our mental health. This is something that I'm really into right now. And so I would like to focus do I think that it's a good idea for government to get more involved in funding mental health? That is not my priority. My priority is to say, let's educate people on realities. Let's help people. Let's fix the roots, and let's help people become more healthy, and thereby have, hopefully, less need of mental health services.
Okay, I'm going to go rogue and just ignore my sheet here for a moment. Specifically, because I work as an attorney for involuntary hospitalizations, Title 25s, they go to the ER right now, and the ER keeps them. Where do you think those Title 25 people should be being treated? Because we have no facility in Fremont County. What should we be doing about them? Well, we can start with Ivan.
You're talking about the people that go to ERs and there was no place for them to go.
Yes.
I think that happens frequently, I shouldn't say too frequently, on the reservation where there's family placement for younger people. We shouldn't forget the younger people in this because they're affected one way or the other by either those issues of their parents or maybe even themselves. But I think when we lost Pine Ridge, that was a big loss. The second floor of the hospital there. I sat on the hospital board for a few years, and it was a place where you could actually place people at that time. Sometimes they had to be voluntary, some had to be involuntary admitted there, but we don't have a place now to place them, and that does leave a void. But it could be said with social services. When something happens at the home, the law enforcement goes to the home and takes the 3 or 4 year old kid and has no place and carries them in their cop car for a few hours before they're placed. So there has to be a lot of discussion on how to continually address that, because it's not a problem that's going to be solved tomorrow.
You're edging back towards what Sarah was talking about. So Sarah, specifically, the Title 25s in the ER, what should we be doing about them? Do we need a facility?
It would be lovely to have the facility. Wyoming and Fremont County isn't the only one that's experiencing this. This, I think, comes back to the access issue that we already discussed. What do we do with our involuntary holds? Much the same as what are we doing with our maternity, with our mothers that need to deliver a baby. We have a real crisis on our hands. I don't have the perfect answer for you. I wish I did. I think it's multifaceted. I think we get the community involved, as Ivan said. We try to have more resources that way, and we start to also chip away at the roots. In the meantime, it's a difficult situation that we find ourselves in.
Okay, thank you. Sarah, if elected, what areas of legislation or policies do you want to work on through the legislative role?
Well, I have several issues that I have brought that I would like to continue working on. Medical freedom and lots of different, that involves lots of different areas, but continuing to encourage, to work for people having the ability to have good conversations with their doctors and make decisions for themselves. I have brought legislation on those issues in the past, and I intend to continue that. Transparency is another big one for me. I brought a bill called By the People Act that says that citizens need to have more access to our local municipalities, our local meetings, because it's the people that are supposed to run the government. The people are supposed to give that direction. And we're busy. We have jobs and we're trying to keep up with the economy. And we don't always have the ability to go to a county commission meeting at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday so that we can understand what's happening in our county. And so we need to make sure that those meetings are recorded, that they're offered remotely, that people can Zoom in, that the meetings are, the meeting minutes are held and posted so that people in their off times, if those exist, in the evenings once they get home, they can go back and they can review things that are important to them. That's something that I want to continue working on. Thank you.
Ivan, if elected, what areas do you want to work on as a legislator?
Well, my experience, I would think, my latest experience would work on education and the continued efforts to educate ourselves about ourselves. I think the tribal community is at a crossroads where through federal policies, obviously change the course of our direction of the people we used to be. But I think that that knowledge is still there that could be utilized within our community and outside of our community. You know, I think with the divisive nature of politics nowadays, the roar of a divisiveness sometimes overshadows the voice of the people, in my opinion. To get things done, you have to work together. You have to address issues, and that's what my campaign has been doing, is listening to people and see what they'd like to work on. You know, I know, as Sarah mentioned, there's ongoing legislation and ongoing projects at the state level that I'm not part of. But I think there has to be a way to start working together to get anything done for the people of Wyoming. That's cooperation. I view myself as an independent thinker, and I will listen. I will take all sides, and I will make my position.
Did you want 30 seconds, Sarah?
Yes, please. So other bills that I've brought in the past that I want to continue working toward is protecting our kids against people who have harmed them. I brought a bill last time that I would like to continue moving forward. I also brought a bill to try to address the illegal dumping and solid waste issues that we have in Fremont County. Fremont County, once again, is not alone, and I brought a bill last time to say what funding can be obtained to help our local municipalities and our tribes start to clean up some of this waste. Those are just a couple other things.
Somebody's going to bring me some audience questions, but in the meantime, Sarah, do you support the court ruling that the act of corner crossing, stepping from one piece of public land to another over a corner shared with private land, does not constitute trespassing?
Corner crossing. You had to bring that one up, right? It doesn't matter which answer I get or I give here. I'm going to find some people who find disfavor with it. So the issue with corner crossing, of course, is that, as a landowner, I recognize that landowners have real issue, and rightfully so oftentimes, with people crossing their land. But as a public citizen who likes to be in the outdoors and get outside, and where we have our grid system of public land and private land and things, how do you access private land without crossing public land? And so I kind of forgot the question a little bit. Do I support the ruling that, I'm sorry, read it to me one more time.
The ruling currently says you can step across the corner.
Okay.
Is that a good ruling or a bad ruling?
Yeah. I think it's reasonable that you can step across the corner. Obviously, there needs to, in actual legislation for that, we need to ensure that proper avenues are taken so that property owners are still protected from damage, because that's what happens a lot of times is people say, well, I'm not going to climb the fence, I'm just going to cut the fence. And then we have issues. And so that's definitely something that needs to, as that comes down, needs to be handled with caution.
Ivan, corner crossing. Do you support the court ruling, there was a court ruling, that the act of corner crossing, stepping from one piece of public land to another over a corner shared with private land, does not constitute trespassing? So if it's like this, right, and you step across, is that trespassing or not in your mind? Actually, not in your mind. Do you support the ruling?
Well, that's putting me on a spot as a person that's been trespassed against for a long time. Not just the corner, but I think, it comes down to property rights and individual rights nowadays of what they feel is trespassing on their land or not. I think it's a complicated issue. I know that's been an issue down at around the Laramie area around Saratoga, and I guess I haven't really put much thought into it, but I think it depends on the landowner, and I know it's in the court system, and sometimes we don't get favorable rulings from the court in terms of individual rights. So I'm still debating that area.
I know you're going to bring me those questions, but I love these other ones too. I do love this one. So Michelle just informed me that there were 20 questions or more submitted, and there's just not time for all of these. So here's 5. And you're going first, Ivan, and I don't even know what it says yet. Do you support Medicaid expansion? Why or why not? Which was the next question I was going to ask on this list.
I do support Medicaid expansion. It's been a forefront of the legislature for years. I know there's a feeling in the state of Wyoming that we shouldn't accept federal money in terms of that area. I don't have the figures how much federal dollars we currently get. I know we get some from the Federal Highway Administration and other areas that that impact us and make life better in certain areas. But I think it would really help the people have access to better health care. I know you talked about the issue of access to health care, quality health care, but insurance is a big issue. There's many people that are uninsured. There's programs like Enroll Wyoming that has other different avenues for them to get insurance. But I think Medicaid expansion, I don't see how it hurt other states that accepted it. But I think Wyoming's got to really consider the loss of our revenues through coal, and as Sarah mentioned, the health of our people, the health of our citizens. So I think that's one area that we could really look at again.
What do you think, Sarah?
Okay, so what does Medicaid expansion really mean to us? So it's talking about expanding the eligibility of who qualifies for Medicaid, increasing it to 138% of the federal poverty level, which right now for 2024 is about $43,000 for a family of 4. The offer on the table is that the federal government would pay for 90% and the state would pay for 10% for 2 years. And what happens after 2 years? It's a question mark. We don't know for sure. It could continue on that way, or the federal government could change the rules. They could say, we're going to go back to 50% and you pay for 50%, which is where we're at right now. So I, of course, have concerns about this. It will greatly expand our Department of Health, which is already the biggest budget in our budget in our state at like $2.3 billion or something like that. It's estimated that there will be about 20,000 new enrollees if we were to expand Medicaid. The benefit we have is we can look at other states and see what has happened there. Let's look at Oklahoma. In 2020, Oklahoma expanded Medicaid. They estimated that they would have about 127,000 people enroll. How many did they have? Over 247,000 people enroll. Their Department of Health budget nearly doubled. Their Medicaid budget went up 200% over what they projected. And so we can learn from other people. With the question of does it expand access, we already know we don't have providers. It takes providers to have access. You can give more people tickets to a movie theater, but unless you have more seats, then no one else is going to get in.
Okay, you're first up on this, Sarah. What is your position on early childhood education? Do you believe that preschool should be government funded and free to all children?
So I think early childhood education is wonderful. I think it's necessary. I think it belongs with parents and in the home. I don't think that this is something that government should get into further. Kids at that age need to be home. And I don't support sending our children off unless it's a parent's choice, but not funded by taxpayers at the young ages of 2, 3, 4.
Ivan?
I do support early childhood education. I think having 2 of my children go through that system, and they was prepared by the time they got to kindergarten. That's a joke. But I think it does have a place in our society. I think the idea is the younger we start them in education, the end result is to keep them in the state. And I know there's a lot of factors of why they leave, whether that's economical or other standards that they want their families to live in. But I think I do support early childhood education.
Are you good? I want to get through more of these. This one's going to set your hair on fire, y'all. Would you support a state referendum on reproductive rights that allows women to access abortion procedures as part of reproductive health care? Additionally, how do you reconcile a desire for less government with government oversight of personal health decisions? Ivan, what do you say?
Well, as I've said many times, I am pro-life, but I don't think it's government's role to make the decisions for a woman in terms of reproductive. So I believe that it's still a woman's choice, and the federal government or state government should have no role in telling that woman what to do in terms of reproduction. But like I said, I'm also pro-life, so it's an interesting mixture, but that's my belief.
So I see pregnancy as involving two lives. I will always be pro-life, and I will always work to support the lives of both individuals. When we're talking about abortion, a decision has already been made. And now our job, I see, should be to ensure that we support both lives. The question talked about personal health choices. So who gets to make the personal health choice for that baby? Until that child is old enough to make its own decisions, we should be tasked with protecting that life. We can't say that a life has no value because it can't live on its own. If we start down that road, that's a slippery slope to then, okay, we need to start going into our nursing homes, and what are we going to do there? Life is life, and it should be protected from conception until natural death.
Sarah, do you agree with the BLM's recent rule changes that will restrict grazing leases for conservation on and off the res? Why or why not?
No, I do not agree with the BLM's rulings on those recent changes. I think that it is a land grab by our federal government that's evidence of government overreach further into our lives. I think that it's negatively affecting our ranchers. They have mouths to feed as well, and the way that they do it is with their animals, with their cattle and the grazing. And so to suddenly come in and say, we're going to cut your leases by X amount, and maybe in a few years you're not going to have any leases. That's a gross overreach of government, and I do not support it.
Do you support it? Do you want me to reread it? Do you agree with the BLM's recent rule changes that will restrict grazing leases for conservation on and off the reservation?
You know, I think when you look at some of the BLM proposed rules and those that have been adopted, I think they really need to continually consult with tribes. You know, some of those areas that they specifically talk about, whether it's drilling or other types of projects. We, as tribal people, inhabited those lands at some point, and it's really important that the executive order that was signed by several presidents to consult with tribes in that process is still very important. I think it's more than just a letter to the business councils asking for their comments. I think people need to learn about the tribes and vice versa. We've learned the system that we currently inhabit, but it's not reciprocal. And I think it comes time that we need to learn more about each other, respect one another, and those rules historically have excluded the tribes for many, many years. So I think it's we'd have to have more dialogue. I don't always agree with the federal government's stance on some of their rulemaking, but it's a system.
Before we go to closing statements, we want to give each of you the opportunity to address negative mailers that have been sent out that may or may not have false information. I know that Sarah wanted to speak to this issue, and perhaps you could go first.
Yes, thank you. I'll try to be brief in respect of everyone's time. So you might have received this in the last few days. So it says, vote no on Sarah Penn. Who does she really work for? Hint, it's not you. And then on the back side, it goes through about 6 different claims as to why they think I'm not a good legislator, and refers you to a website that has about 12 more. And so, you know, first off, I would actually have to say I commend these guys for their proliferative use of adjectives. If they did this without a thesaurus, I mean, way to go, because I'm apparently am quite an ogre. You know, there's a couple of things here that I want to address specifically, but as I was reviewing this for a few hours yesterday, trying to figure out where some of these things were coming from, a pattern emerged. So first of all, this one's been going around on Facebook, and so I just wanted to set the record straight on this one. It says that I support child marriages. It's referring to House Bill 7 in 2023. What that bill actually did was remove parents from a decision-making process when we're talking about unemancipated minors, 16 and 17-year-olds who want to get married. Prior to this bill passing, parents had a role in the decision-making process. And what this bill did is repeal that ability. So only judges can make that decision. Ultimately, though, this is evidence of a difference in values. The person who put this out, the PAC is called Common Sense for HD 33, the chairman of which sat next to me at this forum table 2 years ago. And so it's very clear that we have very different values and very different perspectives and ideas of how we should go forward and how government should be involved in our lives. Many of these are related to the fact that I voted against the budget bill, House Bill 1. To say that voting against the largest, most irresponsible budget in the history of Wyoming means that I don't care about people who are in need, I think is ridiculous, unless you are a big government, big tax, big surveillance, big bureaucracy kind of voter. And so, you know, I just want to say that I was elected 2 years ago on the faith and hope that I would take a different approach to how government should be involved in our lives. And I think that this mailer and this PAC, I have a PAC dedicated totally to opposing me, is evidence that I have upheld that promise. But it's up to you, the voters, to decide.
Ivan, have you had any experience with false, misleading mailers about your campaign?
Not with my campaign yet, but I've had negative approaches to my political career, you know, and I just even though there's divisiveness in tribal politics, I don't see comparably to how the state government and how those systems run in terms of divisiveness. Personally, I have been sometimes the only Indian in the room and had to work with people to get stuff done. And as I mentioned earlier, the roar and the great noise of divisiveness overshadows the people's voice. You know, that's all the chatter you hear is the negative. And the people are down here trying to get your attention. You know, that's my opinion. And being a newcomer to state, running as for state office, that has to be tempered down if anything's going to be done for the people of Wyoming and in this great state.
Thank you both for answering all these questions. If you could lead us off, Ivan, with a closing statement for about a minute, that'd be great.
Well, thank you for listening to Sarah and I this evening. We may have different views on different things, but we get along. We'll shake hands when we leave here. We'll, and I think that shows that doesn't always have to be button heads. I stand strong for my values. I will listen to people. I will take the time. As you know, I'm hearing impaired, so that makes me even listen harder to people. But you know, I'm from here. I'm born and raised here. I love this area. I love the people. I got many of friends and relatives. I call them my relatives. Everybody is my relative here. And I think I could bring something to the area that maybe people would want to listen to. And if I get a chance, I will listen. I will consider all points. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm an independent thinker. I'm not going to follow people. I'm going to get all the facts that I can and do what's best for the people I represent.
Thank you. Sarah?
So I think that a lot of people have become disillusioned with our local governments, and that means both our state governments and tribal governments. I've had a lot of phone calls from enrolled members saying, "Help me, what can I do here?" Now, as a state representative, I don't have any authority in a sovereign nation, but I can still, as I said before, listen and help them. But I have worked hard to be a champion for the people, a lobby for the voice of the people, because when I got to Cheyenne, I thought this, but I did not realize the magnitude until I got there of how much power the lobby has over the voice of the people. And that has been my pleasure, to be able to be a voice for the people, to say the things that people want to have said, that isn't being said, that isn't being discussed because it is less convenient. We want to go this route. That would make us either take more time to have a discussion or take us in a different direction and that we aren't interested in going. Well, the people should be running this state and this government with their voice. And so I have loved having that opportunity. So thank you so much for the opportunity to serve this district, House District 33, for the past 2 years. And I look forward to an opportunity to continue to do those things and bring forward some of these issues that we've discussed, use my background in healthcare and my knowledge of healthcare, because that's such a big issue in Wyoming right now, to help move things forward and move Wyoming in a direction of positive change. I hope that people can look at an election less like a Valentine and more like a chess match. Which move is going to move us forward in the direction that you want? Not necessarily because you've known that person forever, not necessarily because they've been a good neighbor, but because that person can help move your viewpoints forward. And so I just simply and humbly ask for your vote on November 5th, and actually today, possibly because early voting's just started.
On behalf of the League of Women Voters, I really want to thank these candidates for coming here and for such a civil debate. It's really been a pleasure, and we appreciate your time. And we did ask you to hold your applause before, but now it would be wonderful. We would encourage you, the League would encourage you to stay for some refreshments if there's something left over there, and for some conversation with the candidates if they want to stay behind. We'd also encourage you to come to the Lander School Board Forum and Lander City Council Forum on Thursday at the Lander Library if you were a voter over there. That would be great to see you. Thank you again for coming.